Jerry Acuff is a true leader in the realm of both sales and leadership, serving as the CEO of Delta Point, with notable distinction as the author of 4 best-selling books. Jerry's insights have resonated with countless readers. A true legend in sales training, he holds the prestigious ranking of number 4 among the world's foremost sales experts, a testament to his profound impact on the industry. Not only do we have Jerry today, we've actually got 2 guests. Robin Napier, also at Delta Point, is a seasoned business development professional with a track record spanning more than 25 years. Dedicated to achieving tangible results, Robin has amassed a wealth of expertise in sales, a proven driver of sales growth. Robin is characterized by its steadfast commitment to nurturing lasting connections. Now, I know you just heard the word sales a decent amount as I did that introduction, and we may hit on some sales, but our focus today is on building relationships. So, Jerry, Robin, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us.
Hey, I'm
Good
really
to hear,
excited.
Mike.
Thank you, Jerry. Really excited to have you on. And I need to mention that, the only thing that gets to me a little bit is the guy that introduced us all, Tony Capullo, who's a great guy, other than the fact that he's a Red Sox fan. And I know I've got some listeners that are Red Sox fans, and if you need to turn this off because I'm a big Bronx Yankee fan, do it. But it's the only thing. So if I look a little angry throughout the podcast, it's thinking about the Red Sox, the fact that when this airs, the baseball season will be over. But when this is recorded, the Yankees are in last place, doing horribly. So if you sense an attitude, that's exactly why. But welcome anyway, guys.
Glad to be here.
Hey, one thing I want to start with, and I talked to you guys about this before we started the recording. I have a tradition on this show that started about 30 seconds ago, which is at the beginning of every show, I want to know from my guests what they believe the one most important characteristic is of a great leadership team. So, Jerry, Robin, no pressure, but since this tradition is starting on this show, if it goes well, it will keep going. If it doesn't go well, you may be the reason why I don't continue this tradition. So no pressure. But Jerry, let me start with you before we dive into the relationship stuff, or maybe this is part of diving into the relationship stuff. In one word, Jerry, what do you believe is the most important characteristic of a great leadership team?
Trust.
Love it. And I'm sure as we talk about relationships, I'd be shocked if that word didn't come up a little bit more today. Robin, how about you?
Jerry, you just stole my word, but
Oh, no.
I'm going to go with loyalty.
Trust and loyalty. Awesome. Awesome. Well, I think loyalty, I think The Godfather. And I know there's a speaker I know that talks about loyalty and all his stories about The Godfather. So maybe we'll talk about The Godfather today too. So thank you. So trust and loyalty, great start to that. And Robin, let me just start with you. Let me have you tell us, Robin, tell us a little bit about Delta Point and your role there.
Absolutely. So Delta Point is a consulting agency that specializes in basically helping salespeople and their coaches get better at what they do. And so, well, one of the foundations of our organization is built on relationship building. And Jerry is obviously an expert at that. So we embody the meaning of going out there and building relationships. And these relationships are like, hey, we're buddy buddy, we're friends. This is a relationship that, we look at in 3 different ways. Do you have access to this individual? Are you able to have a conversation and influence and have them have an open mind about what you're talking to them about? And what results do you get from that relationship? So we really hone in on the fact of how do you build those relationships? Everybody talks about how important it is, but nobody really talks about how do you go about doing so. So that's what Delta Point, that's what we do. And we help sales individuals, we help their coaches really just be better at what they do. So their coaches lead a better team, their sales reps go out there and, put their best foot forward and excel in their career.
Great. And we'll give you a chance later and it'll be in the show notes to talk about how people can find out more about you and your programs. But Jerry, let me ask you, you wrote a book called The Relationship Edge.
Right.
And so tell us a little bit about why you wrote that book and why you think relationships are so important in business.
Well, it's a great question, Mike. And honestly, probably 30 years ago, a friend of mine and I were writing a book which never got published. It was called What Mama Never Taught You. And it had chapters in it like your mother really does like your brother better. And he wrote that chapter. And I wrote one that if they like you, you have an edge. And in that, I basically created a pyramid where I say there's only six kinds of relationships that you can have with another person. And so first it's, people that don't know me by name. Second level is people who know me by name. Third is people who like me, which means they don't mind being around you, but doesn't necessarily mean you want to go to dinner with you. Next is people that are friendly with you. And those are people that when you begin to your discussion, you usually sort of start off where you left off. Then it's people who respect you. And then people respect you only because you have consistent, persistent, predictable actions over time. And it takes a long time to get to that level. And then the very last level is called people who value a relationship with you. So, for example, I wanted a relationship with a basketball coach at Arizona State. So I got somebody to introduce me. I went there and met him. He asked me if I needed, what I want. I said, well, I don't like your t-shirts. I think they're ugly. I don't need tickets. I got plenty of money, but I'd like to teach your kids how to build relationships while they're in college. He said, well, can you do that tomorrow? Now I've been mentoring him for 16 years and he's one of the top basketball coaches in the country. And I've done that for two or three. But my point is that, there's different levels. When I try to get people to understand that in business, and this is business, in business, I'm always trying to get more people up a level because if I can get you up a level, then I can begin to have different conversations. Because my bias is that the relationship is really a function of how you get engaged. Now, why I wrote the book, I was actually at a pharmaceutical company and I was meeting with a senior vice president. He asked me this question: how do we get more time with customers? Now, I had been a rep and a manager, and I never had any trouble getting time with customers. So I went back and I said, well, I'm gonna read that chapter, and I did. And then I read six books on business relationship, including Carnegie's. And actually, Paul Cherry is a good friend of mine. He calls me the Dale Carnegie of the 21st century. But what's interesting about that book, Mike, is nowhere in that book, any of those books, okay, two of them were written, one was by Maxwell, one was written by Leo Lowndes, one was written by, obviously, the guy who wrote the greatest sort of relationship book of all time, Dale Carnegie. None of them told you how to do it. They all told you what to do. Now, and I'm a guy who ain't that smart. And so I need to know exactly what the hell do you if I want to try and build those relationships. And so I got the idea that I read all six of those books twice. And then I said, well, heck, I think I can figure out how to do it. What exactly do you do? What are the actions that you take to actually get somebody to want to have a business relationship with you? And that's why I wrote the book. And so, we've trained tens of thousands of people on the concept of the relationship edge in business. And we get people to understand this is not about having Facebook friends or somebody follow you on Instagram. This is how do you position yourself with somebody so that they want to have a business relationship with you? Because here's what I've learned. If I have a business relationship with you, you will listen to me differently. And the reality is in sales, which is, sort of where we spend our time, sales and certainly, sales leadership, obviously, because, sales leadership is probably the cornerstone of what makes salespeople great. The reality is I want people to listen to me differently than they listen to my competitors. And I would say to you that the average salesperson doesn't do very good at it. They're so ready to tell their story that their willingness to be non-biased and their willingness to understand the customer gets wiped out by their anxiety.
So I love that, Jerry. And there's two things I want to grab onto from that. The main thing is I want to talk about the how to,
Yeah.
because when it comes to relationship building, I think most of us just believe you're either naturally good at that or not. I'm an introvert, so I'm not real go. I'm an extrovert. And what I love is your perspective on it, that there's a process. So I want to spend a lot of time on that. But before I do, just for those leaders, if you're a leader that's listening and saying, oh, these are sales guys, they're talking about building a relationship so you could sell people something. It's about more than sales. So let's talk a little bit about for the CEO, for the executive leader that may not be the salesperson. Why is understanding how to build relationships important for those folks?
Well, it's not important unless you don't give a damn about success. I mean, the reality is if you want to be wildly successful, and I don't mean marginally successful, I mean wildly successful, you want to have great relationships with your team because you want them to trust you. And the only way that they trust you and then ultimately at the same time respect you is when you actually help them do 5 things. Now, I learned these 5 things 35 years ago from a guy named David Yoho. And Yoho said, look, here's what employees want from a supervisor. Number one, they want competent job instruction. Now, I can tell you for some leaders, they're not great at competent job instruction because they get so high in the atmosphere, they lose connection with the people that are actually out making the calls and the customer. The second thing is they want a degree of independence in doing a job. And I learned that the first time that I actually went out with my very first hire. Every time I make a call, he'd say, I can't do that. I can't do that. I can't do that. And I'm saying, why did I hire this idiot? And basically what he taught me, Mike, was you're trying to make me you. I don't want to be you. I want to be me. And he taught me in my very early stages of my thing that I needed to let him be authentic. Now, let me tell you what happened. I was running a group of 8 salespeople. We had just launched a product. My average sales was $5,000 a month, and I was leading the country. This guy would not even make a call in front of me, and he kept saying, I can't do that. It's not my style. Can't do that. Not my style. I wanted to fire him, but I couldn't figure out how to embarrass myself to my boss because I had fought for this guy who had flunked the exam, to actually go to work for us. And so I told him when I left, I said, look, don't call me till next week because I got to figure out how to fire you. Well, I didn't say that, but that's what I meant. And he calls me the next week. And again, my district is averaging 5,000 a rep. He called me the next week and here's what he said. What do you want me to do with these orders? I said, what do you mean? He said, well, you told me to get these orders. How much is it? $26,000. You know what I said to him, Mike? I said, I don't like your stuff. And my point is we have to let people be themselves. Now, we need to give them a degree of independence in doing the job. The third thing that they want is they want to be informed about the things that the company are doing that impact their life. And being informed sometimes means that as a leader, I just say, I don't know, but I will try to do everything I can to find out. The next thing they want is praise for a job well done. And I will tell you, the average manager stinks at this. Go to Dollar Tree and buy a damn card. Cost you $1, maybe $1.25. And somebody does something extraordinary, send them that. Don't send them a text. Don't call them. Don't send them bulletin. Just actually go buy a card. And then the last thing is they want to work for a leader, not a boss. Boss spelled backwards is double S-O-B. And I don't want to work for a double S-O-B. I want to work for someone who's a leader. Now, what's a leader? A leader is someone who has followers. And so the question you have to ask yourself is, why would someone follow you? What characteristics do you have? What can you offer to them that's so valuable that they would want to follow you? And if you can't do that, they ain't going to follow. They may act like they are, but they're not following.
Jerry, I want to get into how and whether it's leader to follower, or in the case of a big part of building relationships, it may be leader to leader, right? Those peers on the leadership team. There is, you guys in your workshops, I believe in the book as well, you talk about a 3-step process
Right.
to building business relationships.
Right.
So again, let's get into that how, so people don't just think, oh, I'm naturally good or I'm naturally bad. What is that 3-step process?
Well, before I answer that question, I'm going to take on one of your, thoughts here because this is true. Introverts are way better at this than extroverts. Just so
Why
you,
is that? Say more about that. I'm interested in that.
well, if you do any reading about it, introverts, what you find out is that introverts are far more interested in you than they are themselves. And so they're far better listeners. They ask better questions. They think while they're actually having conversations with people. And the average person who's an extrovert doesn't do that. Now I have the lowest I in my group. and I'm an introvert. I'm actually an ambivert. I'm sort of right on the middle. But the reality is, if you're going to build relationships, there's three things that you have to do. And this is basically the formula. Number one, it starts with your mindset. And your mindset has to be, this person would want a relationship with me. And oftentimes in in business settings, there's a huge gap between, let's say, a sales leader and the CEO of the company. When I used to work in a pharmaceutical company, I was a lowly associate director. When I tried to build relationships, number one, I started with the HR person. And honestly, what would happen in our company, they would bring these people in from other subsidiaries, and the people who were, sort of legacy for our company would treat them like they were, that they had the flu or something. And I always tried to take them in and let them understand how did things work. But it starts with your thoughts. Now, what do you have to think? You have to think that someone would want to have a conversation with you. The second thing you have to believe is that you have something to offer them. And if you don't believe that, then you're probably going to say, well, I don't think this person wants a relationship with you. I try and teach people every time I talk to somebody, don't make decisions for other people. It's a bad idea. I cannot tell you, Mike, how many people call me ultimately and they say, I was going to call you before, but I know how busy you are. See, first place, you don't have a damn clue how busy I am. Okay. But that shouldn't matter. If you reach out to me and I do not respond, then you either know I'm a jerk, which my guess is you probably like to know that because then you have to bother with me again, or you're going to find out I'm a pretty good guy. I'm a big believer that the laws of the universe are fairly set. And one of them is when you give, you get. And so when people ask me for guidance or advice, I give it to them. Now, if they're trying to sell me something, it's a whole nother story. I mean, I may listen to them if I'm interested, but the average person who calls me and asks me for advice, I'll say, sure, I'll get on the phone with you and I'll tell you exactly what to do. I'll tell you how to interview. I'll tell you what questions to ask. I'll tell you the big money question you ought to ask in an interview. I'll tell you all that stuff. Why? Because they asked me to. And I know that if I give, I get. Now, if you know where the getting's coming from, that's manipulation. And I don't do that. So it's your mindset. I used to go up to, when we would have these sessions, I'd go up and I'd introduce myself to every speaker. Now, we had 50 managers. I was the only person going up talking to the speakers. And I asked every one of them, I asked them, could I stay in touch with you? And they all said yes, but nobody else would do that. And I don't know why they wouldn't do it. I didn't really care. But to me, my mindset was, I want a relationship with these people. So how are you going to get it? You got to go get it. As it turns out, one of my relationships was a guy named Danny Cox, who one of the greatest speakers ever. And Danny actually, I asked the first book I wrote, The Relationship Edge, Wiley asked me, John Wiley, the publisher, said, who do you know that's famous that could endorse your book? I said, Danny Cox. And Danny endorsed my book. And then he asked me to endorse his second book. So I think one is what you think. The second thing is,
but Jerry, before you go to the second one, I just wanted to hit on how helpful that was for me. And I hope I'm a proxy for the audience in that you said something really important, is that part of that mindset. So I thought you were going to say mindset of, that have a mindset that you want to build this relationship with the other person, but you didn't start there. You started by saying, have a mindset where you truly believe that other person wants the relationship with you. And that's so helpful because I'm someone, while I can get up in front of a room of 1,000 people and speak and feel comfortable, if we were at a networking event or some business event and you say, hey, Mike, you see that guy in the corner over there? It's really important you go meet him because he's done amazing things. He could be helpful to you. For me, it's like all of a sudden my feet weigh 1,000 pounds. I don't want to walk over there because the first thought in my head is, why do they want to meet me? So if I could start with that mindset, and if our audience could start with that mindset of, hey, these people want that relationship as well, all of a sudden my feet aren't so heavy and I can kind of glide over there and start the relationship. So I just wanted to stop before you went to number two. That piece of mindset, I think, is super helpful. So thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome. Well, the next time when you have that reticence, just say, hey, I'm going to go over and say to this guy, Jerry Acuff told me I needed to meet you. And they'll probably either say, they either know who I am, but they probably won't, or they'll say, well, who's Jerry Acuff? Well, he wrote the best-selling book on relationship building, and I read it, and so I'm coming over here and trying to get to know you. Listen, I was on an airplane in Chicago. I'll tell you this story. I was on an airplane in Chicago, first class, and I sat next to a guy. And the first thing he said to me was, I was in the window seat. He was in the aisle. First thing he says to me is, I hate to talk to people on airplanes. Then he put a book between us that said how to sue the person sitting next to you on an airplane. And so I'm sitting there thinking, okay, I've read, and I've seen this guy on TV in Phoenix. And I lived in Phoenix at the time. And I've seen this guy, and he's a very, very great speaker. And he's actually a really good guy. But I'm sure he's had a lot of annoying conversations, right? So I said to myself, okay, Jerry, you've written a best-selling book on relationships. Okay, I mentally said to myself, like, I accept your challenge. Because the real concept of the book that I try and drive home is, how do you build relationships with people that are difficult to build relationships with? Because you and I don't need, I don't need a book to build a relationship with you, and you don't need one to build it with me. But there are people that you meet that are important to you that you got to figure out, how do I actually get to those things? So he started to put his earbuds in. And when he said this, here's what I said. Now, this is one of the questions I try to get people to ask. I said, say, before you do that, can I ask you a personal question? And he ripped those things out and he said, yeah, what do you want to know? Now, Brendan Kane wrote a book called Hook Point. One of the things he says is that, one of the ways to get people's attention is to exercise pattern interruption that makes them want to learn more. Now, this guy was dying to know what I was asking. So he said, where'd you see me? I said, I think I saw you on television in Phoenix. He said, yeah. He said, but I got a whole big series called Hey, Big Spender. And I said, really? I said, tell me about it. Now, this guy talked to me for 3 hours. He never asked me my name. He never asked me anything about me. And I just listened to him. And when we landed in Phoenix, he jumps up and he says, hey, you and I got to get together. You are the most interesting person I've ever met. And so I said to myself, okay, I just proved the fact that you can actually build a relationship with somebody who doesn't want a relationship with you. But you have to have the mindset that there may be something that this person would actually want to learn from you. I mean, if you go up and tell people that you have a podcast, anybody with a brain is going to say, hey, this is somebody I probably need to know. I mean, hell, you could be the next Joe Rogan for all I know. So I don't try and make any judgments about what people do and who they are. But I think the key thing here is I have to have the mindset that I'm not letting this guy shut me up. I'm going to see if I can actually get him to begin to talk to me about it. He sent me his books. He sent me I still have this card that he sent me. It says, man, we got to get together, et cetera. But my point is, a lot of it is, I teach people, if you want to get somebody to talk to you, say, before we get going here, can I ask you a personal question? Now, 95%, maybe 5% won't want you to ask them a personal question, but the average person doesn't know whether you're going to ask them where they're from, where they went to college, where they went to high school, what's their favorite team. In your case, it's the Yankees. In my case, it's the Yankees and the Cardinals, because I grew up going to a Cardinal game, but I was Mickey Mantle's, Mickey Mantle was my idol. But I mean, people want to have conversations to people that they think are not biased and people who are truly interested in them. And I truly am interested in people. So to me, that's the whole concept of having the right mindset.
Excellent.
Is that you have to believe you can bring some value.
So mindset's number one. And Robin, be prepared when Jerry takes us through 2 and 3. I'm going to want to get your view and how you've seen that stuff come to life. So we're going to come back around to you. But Jerry, so mindset's number one. What's number 2?
It's what you ask. I mean, you actually have to understand, you have to ask people questions to find out about them. And, everybody has an invisible tattoo on their chest that says, make me feel important. And the easiest way to make anybody feel important that I have found, and maybe it's not the easiest, it's certainly one of the 2 or 3 easiest, is simply listen to them. But you can't listen to them if you're not asking them the right questions. One of the things I try and teach salespeople is, if you're in a complex sale, and to me, a complex sale is anything over $100, you might want to spend 2 or 3 calls where you don't even talk about your product, where you're trying to learn something about the people that you're calling them, where you certainly try and build a relationship with a gatekeeper if there's a gatekeeper there. But it's the questions that you ask. But if you say, I don't want to say anything today, What happens is sales resistance. If I'm on a sales call and I say when I have a chance to talk, say, I don't want to sell you anything today. What do you think happens to sales resistance? It's gone. Now I'm going to ask questions that lead me to an understanding of how this person thinks because I can't change how they think until I know what they think. But if I take the sales pressure off by my words, and this is why everybody at Delta Point has a business card on the back that says words matter, then the second thing is you ask the right questions and you get them to talking about their favorite subject. Now, what I get people to understand is that what you want them to talk about is what they treasure. It's not what you and they have in common, it's what do they treasure. When you get people talking about what they treasure, you will almost always separate yourself from everybody else.
Let me throw a challenge out to both of you, whichever of you wants to answer. Maybe both of you will have an answer. Is when I think about this, in the environment we live in today, which in some ways is very different than the environment we lived in 3 or 4 years ago,
Right.
when a lot of us are in this remote slash hybrid environment. And I'm not talking about sales here. I'm talking about relationships.
Yeah, sure.
Let's say within a company. 3 or 4 years ago, there were conversations, relationship building conversations that would happen in the hallway in between meetings where you might say, "Hey, tell me again about your family. Hey, what do you have coming up this weekend?" Where you're asking questions that may have nothing to do with business. You're getting to know the other person. There's a gentleman that had actually retired a few months ago, one of my clients, who was the historian for the company. He had been at the company for 45 years.
Well,
And the value he added he wasn't the best sales guy. He wasn't the best technologist anymore. But the value he added is he was the guy you talked to when you had an issue. He knew the way that company worked, he knew the history. And when you were live and in person in the office, he was the guy you wanted to have the water cooler conversation with. When things went remote and then hybrid, his value to the organization sadly diminished to almost zero because on a Zoom call, when you have a Zoom call to have a discussion, you don't have the meeting before the meeting after the meeting, the talk in the hallway. Hey, let's go out to lunch. So when it comes to asking questions and building these relationships, and I know we haven't gotten to step 3 yet, how does it change? What do we need to think about in a remote or a hybrid environment that maybe was more natural before?
Robin, you want to take that?
Sure thing. I think it's still just as important, right? I mean, you check if it has to do with your coworkers, check in with them. If your leader, make a call to your employee, see how they're doing. Don't have it be about work. Have it be, hey, how's life going? Really get a true understanding about what's going on in that person's world. When one of the things that I did a lot of is check in with teammates, really try to figure out, hey, how's it going? What are you running into? Tell me, what have you been up to? We don't get to go out. We don't get to do all these things. What are you and your family? What have you guys been doing? It's just a really making somebody, like Jerry said earlier, feel important. And I think it's truly, it doesn't matter if it's over a Zoom call. It doesn't matter if it's over a phone call. Whatever it is, still inquire how that person's doing, what's going on in their life, and don't have it all be about work. It's super important that people feel like they're valued and, what they're doing and, they want to share. So if people aren't asking, they're not giving that information. So I think it's just as important, to be honest with you.
Jerry, anything to add?
Yeah, I'd say three things. I think number one is, be creative.
Mm.
Most people, if you look at their subject line, they're not creative at all. Hey, can we, catch up or something? I always try and write something I think that they'll want to know. What the hell did this guy, why did he send this message here? Because I want to know what he wants to learn. So the other thing I try and teach people is the four most powerful words. I've heard somebody say this before, and it's hard for me to argue. The four most powerful words in the English language are, I need your help. And if you ask for somebody for help, the average person is going to want to give you help. They don't know what the help is you need, but most people, not all, but the vast majority of people are people that are certainly willing to help people. And I think the last thing is leverage the relationships that you have, or maybe you have. I don't get on a call ordinarily with any client if I know who's going to be on there, that I don't look every single one of them up and see what connections do we have in common. And when I get to talk to them, I will raise up some of those people and say, how well do you know, Robin Napier, if at all? And they'll say, oh, I know Robin really well. She and I worked together, 3 years ago, and she was terrific, et cetera. But whenever find something where people can say, okay, this person's okay, you're really good. Most people, and the other thing is, if you have the right mindset, you can meet people that, you never thought that you could meet if you actually do it the right way. I mean, I teach people the exact words that you use if you want to meet somebody that have never met. Like this basketball coach at Arizona State. I just asked everybody I knew, how well do you know this guy at all? And 9 people said I don't. 10 person said I know him really well. Next question: how comfortable would you be introducing? And he said, yeah, you want to have breakfast with him next Thursday? I said, sure. Now, what I also think is that whenever you do get an opportunity like that, you better be able to take some value to the table, because they're going to want to know, why did you want to talk to me? So, but if I do that, and to me, a lot of times I still think the I need your help is there. And I mean, I'll call people. I drove 6 hours 2 weeks ago to have dinner with one person. Took me 6 hours to get up there and 6 hours to get back because I needed his help. And that's what I said. I need your help. He said, sure, come up here. Now, this is a high level person who I've known for an awful long time. And he was very, very helpful to me. People are willing to help you if you just ask for it. But I think the key is, to be creative. If you're sending them an email, and if you're not sending them an email and you send them a voice message, be creative without being stupid. And then I think the other thing is leverage the relationships. You got to try and figure out, who do they know that you know? Because if I introduce you to somebody, then that person does not start at the bottom of the pyramid. Have a pyramid, this relationship pyramid. If I introduce you and I say, hey, I want you to talk to this person, there's probably an 80% chance that if I ask them to do that, they'll do it. But a lot of people won't ask, but you should.
The one thing I'll add before I want us to get to step 3, it was mindset. It was, it's about what you ask, and then we'll get to the third step. But the thing I would just add on this kind of remote hybrid environment, and specifically within a hybrid environment, is what I find is companies say, okay, we're going to be in the office Tuesdays and Thursdays.
Right.
But what they do on Tuesdays and Thursdays is the same crap they do Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So people are there on Tuesday and Thursday going, you know what? I'm spending an hour and a half commuting, back and forth to be in an office when I could have done the same thing at home. And people resent, why do I need to be in the office if I'm just doing the same thing I could have done at home? What most companies have not started doing yet is saying, how could we leverage the in-office time to do some things that we can't do or can't do well when we're working totally remotely? And one of those things is building relationships.
Right.
Because it is
Yeah.
harder to build relationships over Zoom. So if you can take those Tuesdays and Thursdays you're in the office and say, all right, what could we do specifically to get to know each other, build some relationships? Then people are actually getting value from being in the office those days.
Yeah, well, I love your idea, because the reality, this is what I hear you saying. What you're saying is that most of these people that are in situations like that have poor leadership. Because anybody who's a really good leader is going to say, if I want you to come into this office, then I expect that we're actually going to do something that you find meaningful and probably fun. One of the things that I find that a lot of leaders forget is that if you want people to be loyal, if you want people to respect you, you better make their job fun. And one of the things I mentor 3 college basketball coaches, and here's what I tell them. And I think this is true. I talk about this for my own children. You got to love them for what they are, not for what you wish they were. The key to greatness is actually loving the people you work with. It's not liking them, it's loving them. It's loving them enough to give them your very best. And your very best is not very good if all you're doing is asking them to do something mundane on Tuesday and Thursday that they could have done at home. That's lousy leadership, in my point, from my perspective.
Agreed. Agreed. So 3 steps. Mindset number 1, it's what you ask was number 2.
Right.
Jerry, what's number 3?
What do you do? I mean, relationships are all built on actions. You can take those other 2 things, and I'm not saying that they're not important, but fundamentally, our relationships are built on actions. And your actions need to be consistent, persistent, predictable over time. And once they are, then I can say, okay, I know exactly what Mike Goldman's like. Exactly. And I know that this is somebody I want in my life. This is somebody I want to be friendly with. This is somebody I want at the top of my pyramid. But that's based on what you do. And I'll give you a simple example. I hired a woman years ago. Her name is Valerie Sokolowski, and you ought to have her on. She's unbelievably wonderful, terrific consultant. I wanted her. She was, at that time, she just focused on manners. And I had a bunch of, what I thought were people that we were taking out, important people, and I don't think they knew how to. I know I don't drink wine, so I didn't know what, if it's red or white, what the hell do you do with it? And so I hired her to come to a session in San Antonio. She's from Texas. She lives in Dallas. And she came, and her son had just gotten killed in, I think, a motorcycle accident. And then she had another son, and then she had a daughter. And so, she was terrific. And so we became really good friends, still are good friends. And she asked me one time, she says, what does your daughter like? And I had a 13-year-old daughter at the time. I said, well, she's freeze for this television show. And I think it's filmed in Canada, but she's just her favorite thing. She says, well, what is it? And I told her, she said, my son is the star of that show. And I'm like, so I went home, told my daughter, I said, you're not going to believe this. I said, but Valerie's one of my consultants. Her son is actually the guy that is your heartthrob. And, she was all excited that she knew somebody that knew him. Well, Thanksgiving Day, because this was like in October, Thanksgiving Day, my phone rings in New Jersey at 10 a.m. and it's Valerie. And I'm asking myself, Mike, why is she calling Thanksgiving? Now, I really, I'd met her husband, I hadn't met her kids. And then it hit me. She said, where's Laura? And I said, well, she's right here. Put her on the phone. Now, why did she do that? Because who's at her house? And so I hear my child scream, and this is one of the highlights of her life. Now, that's a person that I will go to the end of and it's a story that is, 25 years old, but I will never forget it. That's an unexpected, thoughtful act. So we teach people, how do you do unexpected, thoughtful acts? And they're not hard to do. But if you're a good listener, let's say you're talking to a colleague, tell you they're going to New Orleans for their 25th anniversary. And have you ever been to New Orleans? No. That's all I need to know. So that night I'll go home and I'll call the Ritz-Carlton in New Orleans. I say, do me a favor. I got friends coming down there. Can you give me the name of 2 or 3 restaurants that are not Galatoire's, they're not Emerald's. I mean, they're not the famous places that, ordinary people in New Orleans would go to. Can you just give me a couple of those? The concierge will do that without a blink. And then you go the next time you see him, you say, hey, you told me you were going to New Orleans for your 25th anniversary. I happened to call the Ritz-Carlton and they gave me the name of these 2 restaurants. I thought I'd give them to you. Now, who do you know in this world that doesn't like thoughtful people? We love thoughtful people. Problem is, most of us don't have the mindset that I need to be thoughtful. And then, so your actions, the things that you do, need to be consistent, persistent, predictable over time, or they need to be an unexpected, thoughtful act. People love thoughtful people. They don't forget them, because when you're thoughtful, what you do is you transmit to this other person that they're really important to you. And I think that's how you make people want a relationship with you.
I love that. Just wrote down the phrase unexpected, thoughtful acts. Like
We call them UTAs. That's what
love
we
it.
call them, unexpected, thoughtful act, UTA.
That sounds too much like urinary tract infection. I'm going to call it an unexpected. Oh, that's UTI. That's different. That's different. Okay.
Well, you had me there, Mike.
The next thing I want to hit on, you talk about mapping relationships, right? Tell me, and I don't know if that goes back to the pyramid, or it's something else, but you talk about mapping relationships. What do you mean by that, and how does that work?
Well, it's all related to the pyramid because what I want to try and understand is where am I with this person? Because where I am with that person is going to dictate what actions do I actually take next. So, for example, if I'm, and I mentor probably two of the top 20 basketball coaches in the country. And so, what do I do for them? I mean, I oftentimes I listen to their press conferences and I'll call them and say, hey, here's an idea that you might have. And then they'll call me and they'll ask me a question, et cetera. If I'm somebody that I don't know very well, then the first thing I'm going to do if I want to meet them is I'm going to do some research on 'em. Actually, there was an author that's a Stanford professor, wrote a terrific book, and I wanted to meet her. And I had done a TV show with Bob Cialdini, and Cialdini is the greatest, persuasion expert in the world and a wonderful being. So he and I had done a TV show on car salespeople, and I love his stuff. But I called her office. I said, I'd like to, see if I could get an appointment to talk to the doctor. And I explained who I was. And of course, they don't know who the hell I am. I'm sure most people don't. But she said, well, you'll have to send her an email. She decides based on your email. So I thought about that email for a long time and I read her book and I sent her a message and I said, I'd love to have a conversation with you because I think you discovered something that even Dr. Cialdini missed. You think she called me? You damn right she did.
Love
I
it.
mean, she knows that she and Cialdini are in the same basic lane, right? But she had an idea that he had not had, and I thought was genius. And we had a wonderful conversation. But my point is, it's really thinking about, how can you get access to this person if they don't know you? If they do know you, what are some unexpected, thoughtful acts that you can do that would get them to move up the pyramid? And then how, as a person in their life, can you have consistent, persistent, predictable actions over time that show to them that they can respect you and they can trust you? Because if you can build those things over time, then you can build relationships. And once you get people to the top of the pyramid where they value a relationship with you, that's when they come to you and you go to them with sort of equal philosophy because they want your ideas because they believe that you have ideas that can help.
And Jerry, are you suggesting that this pyramid and mapping people to the pyramid again, I'm thinking of a leader on a leadership team and they've got their peers, they've got the CEO, they've got their direct reports, they've got the external vendors. Maybe they are in sales, maybe they're not, but at very least they've got external vendors. Are you literally suggesting that people kind of take every important relationship and map where are they on the pyramid? How am I going to move them up the pyramid? Is it more just, hey, think about this kind of symbolically, or is it literally kind of let's map each person and what's your next step to move up the pyramid?
I think once you really understand a pyramid, you don't need a map. You don't need to write it down. You intuitively know based on the way the other person interacts with you, where are you on the pyramid? And once you know where you are on the pyramid, then, I mean, we actually have a whole document that tells you, well, how do you move somebody from one level to the next? And we're not talking about salespeople, we're talking about anybody. So we created a document to give people an idea of, okay, if you feel that this person is at this level. One of the things I always tell people, if I do a session with a group of salespeople, let's say I got 50 people in there, and I asked this question. I said, if you had to guess, what percentage of the people that you call on do you have a great relationship with? And that number is usually well over 80%. Then I asked this question. I said, okay, now, if I define a great relationship as access when I need it, this person will listen to me differently and they will proactively help me succeed. That's someone who's at the top of my pyramid. What percentage of your customers are like that? And you know what that number goes down to? 10 or 15%. And what I'm trying to say, it's hard to get people to the top, but when you get them to the top, the benefits are unbelievable.
So as we start to wrap up, I want to make sure we're leaving folks with a few more. We've already got a ton, but maybe a few more specific things that here's what I'm going to go do after I'm done listening to this episode. Maybe they'll listen to another episode, but they
Right.
stop after this. What are they going to go do? So when you talk about the things you can do to move people up the pyramid, I don't necessarily want to call them shortcuts because I don't know if shortcuts the right word, but specific actions people could take if they're thinking about the relationships they have now. What are a few specific actions that we haven't already talked about that people ought to think about moving on today, tomorrow?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the answer is, to me, I think it's what questions you ask. Now, if you look in the book, if you read the book, there's 20 questions that you can ask anybody that'll get them to talking about themselves. And that is almost always the catalyst for people wanting to have a better relationship with you when they realize that you're not like everybody else. You're not trying to shove something down their throat, that you're not trying to get their job. If you're talking about it, I mean, I used to work in a very large organization and I was the VPGM and I had lots of people, but I also knew that my leadership was directly related to how much they wanted to hear what I had to say. Well, you know what that means? That means I got to care what you say. And I used to do a Saturday chat by, Jerry Acuff by the lawn. So I'd go out and cut the grass in the morning and then I'd come in and I'd do a call and I'd have 200 people on there out of 5. And I'd say, ask me whatever questions you got, whatever you want to ask, and things I could answer, I could answer. But I think it's demonstrating that you care, genuinely care. And the only way you do that is by trying to find something out about it. I read a thing years ago and it said, yeah, if you want to exchange information with another person, and essentially whether you're working, at IBM and you're working with a whole bunch of technology people, or if you're in sales, you are going to want to exchange information with people. And this person said, look, the only reason people would exchange information with you is 2 things. Number 1, they don't think you're biased. Now, the reality is, if you're biased, then you ought to get rid of it because it's the death knell of success. The second thing is people want to believe that you truly understand them. And the reality is most people that we talk to, the conversations are not geared towards true understanding of who this person is and how they think. You cannot change what somebody thinks until you know what they think. And the vast majority of us are in such a hurry to be successful that we don't step back and say, let me get to know this person. Let me get to see how I can help them. If you do that, I think you'll be wildly successful.
So, Robin, let me ask you, and then Jerry, you may have some input as well. When I think of Jerry, when you just that was really helpful, and I think, hey, as a leader, maybe one of the things a leader can do, even though maybe they're not taking that, they're not mapping every relationship literally as a next step. If you are the CFO on the team or whatever, you may take your peers on the team, your direct reports, maybe the CEO, and say, hey, what is it that I can do for each of those folks to show that I care? And maybe
Yeah.
that's the first step. But here's the question, Robin, I want to ask you, because I know what the CEOs I work with, I know what some of them may think is, well, I'll do that for these people. This person, kind of, I don't really care about this person. They've pissed me off. I don't know if they're long for the team. I don't, and that could be if you're the CEO looking at your team, that could be a peer where maybe you know, the COO is not real happy with the VP of sales. And, what do you do when there's someone on your team that at this point you don't really care about? And maybe it goes back to mindset, but is it okay to just write somebody off and say, I don't care? Or is there an action you can take to start caring?
That's a great question. And at the end of the day, I think as a true leader, it's important that you care about everybody on your team. That, everybody is going to add value in one way or another. And, really, hey, maybe they just don't know about that person, enough about that person. Maybe, the leader needs to get to know that person a little bit more. Maybe take the extra time to ask some more questions to find out who they truly are. They may see one side and not know the rest. So, just getting to know your team, really taking the time out to find out what makes them tick, what's important to them, what are they passionate about, and then being able to break that down, they may see this person in a whole different light, other than, hey, they don't get along at work, this and that, but do they really truly know that person? So I think it's super important that leaders take the time to know their people and to get to know them. And that pain in the butt might be the coolest person you've ever met, so why not take that extra time?
Gary, other thoughts?
No, I think she hit the nail on the head. But I'll tell you a story that we had a downsizing when I was running, I was in the drug business, and we had to let go, I think, six pharmacists that we had 18. And one of my reps from Texas was number 5 in the country every year, top 5 out of 500. I mean, unbelievable. So HR comes into my office one day and says, "What are you going to do about this guy?" And I said, "Well, what do you do?" And she said, Read the email he sent you and me," because I hadn't looked at the email. And here's what he said: "You people are vile and disgusting. I vomit in your face and I dare your response. Firing the likes of blank, you're nuts." She said, "What are we going to do with this? We're going to fire him for sure." I was going to fire him? You think I'm going to fire this guy? You're crazy. "Well, what are you going to do?" I said, "Well, teach him a lesson." She said, "Well, what do you mean you're going to teach him a lesson?" I said, "I'll teach him a lesson." "Well, when are you going to do it?" And I said, "I don't know, a couple of weeks." I said, "Let me ask you a question. You think he doesn't know I'm going to call him? I want him to sweat it out a bit." I said, so I called the guy one night. His wife answers the phone, and you can hear her say to him, "It's Jerry. And so he gets on the phone, and the first thing he says is, "I'm in trouble, aren't I?" I said, "No, Chuck, you're stupid." And I said, "Let me make this. Look, you can call me an idiot anytime you want to, but call me on the phone and tell me. Do not put it in writing. You put me in a lousy position. I do not want to do anything to hurt you. And I understand your situation because this is a horrible change. I didn't like it myself. But the reality is, I need you. If you want to tell me to go to hell, you call me and tell me that. Don't put it in writing. Because if you do it again, I'm going to have no choice but to take action I don't want to take." He said, "Is that it?" I said, "That's it. That's it." So it's exactly what Robin said. I mean, I understood his perspective. This is one of the things that leaders, Jeannie Duck wrote a great book it's about change, called The Change Monster. It's a terrific book. Any leader should read it. But basically, there's huge emotion when these organizations go through change. And as a leader, if you don't understand those emotions and understand that people are going to have those kind of moments that this rep did, then you're not the kind of leader that you ought to be. And so I think the reality is you gotta try and figure out where people are coming from. The vast majority of the people there are not there to be disruptive. They're there to express how they feel, and emotions drive almost everybody. And so I think the better you can get to know these people and the more empathetic that you can be with them, the more successful you'll be as a leader.
Love it. And I'll add something to your mindset. That first step, because I think this has a lot to do with mindset, is very often we automatically believe in the negative intent of other
Mhm.
people,
Yeah,
right? Like somehow they wake up in the morning and say, "What can I screw up today?"
right.
And I never met anybody like that. I'm sure they exist in the world, but I've never personally met anyone. So I believe, and I have a whole TED talk I did on this, but I believe if we could shift that focus and believe in what I call the law of positive intent. And the law of
Right.
positive intent is everyone's just trying to do the best they can with the resources they have. So when you get that horrible email or someone screws up or pisses you off or breaks your trust or whatever it is, if you ask a simple question like, automatically you tell a story in your head about how they're horrible people. But if you ask yourself a simple question, what else could this mean? What else could
Oh,
this
yeah.
mean? And if you believe in their positive intent, that goes right to your first step of mindset. And that's going to get you curious instead of angry. That curiosity is going to cause you to ask questions, which is your second step. And if you've got any ability to build a relationship there, that's the way you're going to do it, is by believing that they actually have positive intent.
Well, I think the other thing is that, I think you really hit on probably one of the most important things we've talked about today. The reality is, a lot of times the reason that people actually say things or do things that are you and I might not do ourselves is because there's something else going on in their life that we don't know about. And I always say, look, if your performance in any way or your behavior in any way is related to something going on in your life, I have no right to know what it is. I just need you to know that in 90 days, you'll be past it. There are things in life, I know you can't get over the death of your mother or your father in 90 days. You never will get over it, but you can get past it. So I think what you're talking about is having true empathy, really trying to understand what's the genesis, what's the intent. Intent is one of the most powerful words in the English language. It's my mindset at the time of a specific action. And if I can understand what that mindset is, sometimes it doesn't bother me that other people aren't performing. It's because they got something else going on in their life that they've got to deal with. And we all have those things. So I love what you had to say, Mike.
I love that you loved what I had to say. Uh, yeah, Jerry, Robin, this was super, super helpful. As we wrap things up, where should people go if they want to find out more about both of you? If they want to find out more about Delta Point?
Well, we have a website, www.deltapoint.com. You can Google me, and if you want to listen to me yap about something, there's probably video on YouTube or something about that. But it basically, it's, all of our, our employees have an email, and it's all first letter and your last name at deltapoint.com. Robin can tell you how to get in touch with her. And, she does terrific work for us. And, we love our employees, and we certainly are excited that she's with us. So Robin, you want to answer that for
Sure
Mike?
thing. So yes, my email is rnapier@deltapoint.com. But one thing I want to finish with is, you know, really one of the reasons that I joined Delta Point to begin with is Jerry just doesn't talk the talk. He walks the walk. And everything that he says is 100% what he does. And it's very rare these days that when you join an organization, a leader, they put their best foot forward in front of everybody. But when they actually do what they say that they do and live by that and breathe that, it's a whole different ballgame. And, at Delta Point, we truly are a family like that. Everybody loves each other and we all respect each other. And do we all agree on everything? And, everything's the same? No, it's not. But we have that mutual respect and understanding with everybody. And we genuinely care about one another. So it makes a huge difference in an organization. And Jerry is definitely a great example of that for
Well,
sure.
if you want a great company, you've got to have a great leadership team.
Yes.
And
I hear.
Jerry, Robin, thanks for helping us get there, or at least a little closer there. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us,
Thank
Mike.
you.
We really appreciate you
Yes.
inviting us.